Cross never believed accidents could change a life. He was just an ordinary human living on Orion Station, a massive space hub where dozens of alien species and humans lived together after the Great Galactic War. Peace existed now, but it was not comfortable peace. It was careful, quiet, and full of invisible distance. Was a maintenance technician. He fixed broken doors, damaged lights, and failing oxygen vents. Nothing heroic, nothing special. Humans like him were common across the station, small, fragile, and easily ignored by stronger alien races. His roommate was one of those races. Her name was H. She belonged to a species known across the galaxy as disciplined, powerful, and emotionally controlled. They were tall, with pale blue skin that softly reflected light. Their glowing silver eyes made most humans uncomfortable. During the war, soldiers had been terrifying enemies. Now, one of them shared a room with. They spoke little. Not because they hated each other, but because neither knew how to cross the invisible wall between human and alien. They respected space. They followed rules. They lived quietly. Until that day. Shift ended early. A power failure in another sector delayed his work order, so he was sent back to his quarters sooner than usual. His body ached. His mind was tired. All he wanted was rest. The hallway outside their shared room was silent, too silent. Pressed his hand to the door panel. It slid open without resistance. And stopped breathing. H was standing in the center of the room. Strange light floated around her, forming unfamiliar symbols in the air. The temperature felt different, heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. Her hands were raised, shaking. Her tall body was slightly bent forward, as if carrying an invisible weight. Then saw her face. Her eyes were closed tightly. Dark liquid rolled down her cheeks. She was crying. His heart pounded. This was impossible. Did not cry, that was what the files said. They did not break. They did not lose control. They were survivors, cold, efficient, and unshaken. Yet here she was. Broken. Small. Human. Took a step back by instinct. The sound of his boot touching the floor echoed in the room. H's eyes snapped open. Fear flashed across her face, raw and unfiltered. The lights around her shattered and vanished. The symbols collapsed into nothing. She staggered slightly, catching herself before she fell. "You were not meant to see this," she said. Her voice trembled. Swallowed hard. I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't know. I'll go." He turned to leave. "Wait." The word was soft, almost a plea. Froze. For several seconds, neither of them moved. H slowly lowered her hands. Her shoulders still shook, though she tried to stand straight to look strong again. But the mask had already fallen. "You must forget what you saw," she said. "Weakness is not tolerated." Turned back. He looked at her, not as an alien, not as a former enemy, but as someone standing alone in pain. "I can't," he said honestly. Her eyes narrowed. "You will report me." "No," said firmly. She stared at him, confused. "No," she repeated. Stepped fully into the room and let the door slide shut behind him. "No," he said again, "I won't." Silence filled the space between them. "You should fear me," H said. "Your species does." Shook his head slowly. "Right now," he replied, "you don't look like something to fear." Her breath caught. For the first time since arriving on Orion Station, H felt truly seen. And realized something deep inside his chest. Opening that door had not been a mistake. It was the beginning of something that would test humanity itself. The room was silent after closed the door behind him, yet it felt heavier than ever. H's trembling hand still hovered near her chest, as if she could hold her fear inside if she just tried harder. Sat on the floor, careful not to get too close, careful not to make a wrong move, careful not to scare her again. "You don't understand," she whispered finally, her voice shaking. "Humans, you show your feelings openly. We do not. Weakness is dangerous. Weakness is punished." stayed quiet. He had learned something about listening. It was different from speaking. Listening required patience, and right now, patience was all she needed. "Why are you crying?" he asked gently. H's eyes glimmered in the soft, artificial light of the room. She looked away, embarrassed. Because I remember everything." She began to speak haltingly at first, then faster as the words fell like stones. Listened without interruption. She told him about the war, about her planet once vibrant and full of life, now reduced to ashes, about her family who had fought bravely but were gone, taken by fire and betrayal, about the war crimes she had witnessed, the cities that burned, the screams that haunted her even in her sleep. "We survived," she said finally, her voice cracking. "But survival is heavy." Nodded slowly. He did not try to comfort her with words she might not understand. Instead, he simply sat there, a quiet presence, letting her feel her pain. "I'm supposed to hide this," she continued, finally meeting his gaze. "I'm supposed to appear perfect, strong, untouchable. That is what my people demand, but every night the memories come back. Every night I fail to hold them back." Her glowing eyes filled with tears again. Could see the exhaustion in them, the kind that only comes from carrying too much grief alone. He realized something in that moment. H's strength was not in her control, as everyone believed. It was in her survival, in facing each day despite everything she had lost. "You're not weak," said softly. H flinched. "You don't understand. If someone knows," her voice dropped. "They could send me away, exile, containment, or worse. The station does not forgive weakness." "I won't tell anyone," promised. He felt a surge of determination he hadn't known he possessed. "And if anyone tries to hurt you, I'll stop them." Her lips parted in surprise. No human had ever said such a thing to her. She had always been alone, surrounded by others but truly unseen. Now, sitting in the quiet room with this fragile human who had walked in by accident, she felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "Why do you care?" she asked, suspicion and curiosity mixed in her voice. "Because someone once helped me when I was afraid," said, shrugging slightly. "Maybe it's my turn to do the same." H studied him. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, though her eyes still glimmered with uncertainty. "Your species, humans, you face fear, and yet you choose to protect." "That's what we do," replied simply. "We make mistakes, we get hurt, but we protect each other, even strangers, even aliens." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched H's face. It was the first hint of something human in her alien features. For the first time, she let herself feel safe. The room remained quiet for a long while. Words had been shared, secrets had been revealed, and the unspoken understanding between them grew, something fragile yet stronger than anything had ever felt before. Finally, H whispered, perhaps you are not like the others." Shook his head with a faint smile. "I'm just human." She looked at him, eyes wide and luminous. "Human are capable of such courage." "Courage isn't about being fearless," he said. "It's about standing even when you are afraid, even when everything tells you to run." H's gaze fell to the floor. She did not speak, but her glowing eyes betrayed a spark of hope, something she hadn't dared feel in decades. Realized that in the middle of her grief, in the middle of the memories she carried like heavy stones, a connection had formed. One being, human, had entered her space and chosen empathy over fear. For the first time since the war, H allowed herself to believe she might survive, not just physically, but emotionally. And in that moment, realized something too. Sometimes the greatest battles are not fought with weapons, but with understanding and trust. The night stretched on. Stars blinked beyond the windows of Orion Station, indifferent to their tiny room. And yet inside, warmth and compassion filled the cold space. A human and an alien, two beings from different worlds, had met at the point of vulnerability, and nothing would ever be the same again. Life on Orion Station was supposed to be quiet, orderly, and safe. But secrets never stay hidden forever, especially not ones as fragile as H's. Noticed the first signs when H began avoiding certain station areas. She skipped morning drills and sometimes stayed in their room for hours, staring out at the stars with a faraway look. At first, he thought she needed rest, but then the whispers started. "Have you noticed the girl acting strangely?" a young human engineer murmured one evening. Something must be wrong, another replied. She skipped her patrols again. His heart sank. He knew that in a station governed by strict rules and mixed species, any hint of weakness could make H a target. Were already feared, and now anyone could see that she was fragile, vulnerable. It happened faster than expected. One morning, station security came knocking at their door. Their heavy boots echoed in the corridor. The airlock hissed as they stepped inside the room. Their faces were impassive, professional, but could see the sharp suspicion in their eyes. "Cross," one officer began, his voice cold and direct. "We have reports regarding your roommate. There is concern regarding her stability and behavior. We will need to conduct an assessment." H stiffened immediately, as if the words alone could wound her. "I'm fine," she said, her voice clipped. "You have no right." Stepped in front of her instinctively. "She's fine," he said firmly. "She just needs some time. She's been through a lot, and this is personal, not dangerous." The officer's eyes narrowed. "You are a human. You may not understand the gravity of a showing weakness. This concerns the safety of the station." His fists clenched. "I understand enough to know she's not a threat. She's my roommate. That makes it my responsibility to protect her." The officers exchanged glances. One of them tapped a screen, bringing up reports of H's skipped drills and delayed duties. "You may face consequences for interfering," the officer warned. Swallowed, "I accept that. But I will not let her be punished for being human, excuse me, for being vulnerable." H's glowing eyes widened in disbelief. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not a human, not an officer, not anyone. She looked at with a mix of fear and gratitude. The officers left with warnings, but knew it wasn't over. Word would spread. Rumors would grow, others would watch, and H would feel the weight of all eyes on her fragile shoulders. That night she packed a small bag in silence, found her in the dim corner of their room. "I will leave," she whispered, "before they force me, before anyone sees me fail again." Knelt beside her. "No," he said simply. "You're not running from this. You've survived worse than whispers and suspicions. You are stronger than you think." She shook her head. "You don't understand. The station does not forgive weakness. I will be removed, or worse." "You survived a war," reminded her gently. "And now you're alive. That is proof you are strong, not perfect, not untouchable, but alive. And alive means you get to fight for yourself." Her hands trembled as she clutched her bag. Tears, human alien couldn't tell, streamed down her cheeks. For a moment she let herself feel the weight of fear, the fear of exile, of punishment, of judgment. "Reached out, you're not alone," he said. "I'm here, I won't leave you, not now, not ever." H's shoulders sagged. She had spent decades hiding pain, pretending control, carrying grief alone. And now, for the first time, someone was offering her support without conditions, without fear. The night stretched long. The station hummed outside, indifferent to their struggle. But inside, a bond had formed. Courage to stand for her, to speak for her, had sparked something deep inside H, a fragile hope that perhaps she could trust again, that perhaps the universe had not forgotten her. Why would you do this for me?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible. "Because someone once helped me when I was afraid," said softly. "Maybe it's my turn to do the same." H stared at him. Her glowing eyes flickered, reflecting the light of distant stars. Perhaps your kind is capable of more than I believed." Smiled faintly. "We have our faults, but we also have courage and empathy and the will to protect those who cannot protect themselves." For a long time she didn't speak. She just let the words sink in. The whispers of the station, the threats of authorities, the fear of exile, all of it still existed. But presence created a shield around her, a human shield, unwavering and firm. And in that quiet room, two beings from different worlds learned something crucial. That survival is not just about fighting with strength, but about standing with someone who believes in you, even when everything else doubts you. For the first time since she arrived on Orion Station, H felt safe. And realized that sometimes the greatest battles are not fought in corridors or with weapons. They are fought in hearts and minds, in choices, in courage to protect the vulnerable, no matter the cost. Days on Orion Station grew heavier. The whispers of other residents still lingered, but now something worse was coming. The pressure of expectation, the fear of discovery, and the strain of trying to survive while fragile and exposed. H felt it in every fiber of her being. Each day, her control slipped a little more. It started with small things, a light flickering when she passed, a minor system error when she reached for a console. No one noticed at first, but H felt every failure deeply, and each mistake fed her growing anxiety. Watched her quietly, noticing the tension in her shoulders, the way her glowing eyes dimmed slightly when she thought no one was looking. He knew she was approaching a breaking point, but he didn't know how to help. Words weren't enough. The station rules, the hierarchy, the distrust of weakness. It all pressed down on her like gravity on a small, fragile planet. One night, alarm screamed. Harsh, mechanical, unavoidable. Woke instantly, heart pounding. Red lights painted the walls of their room, systems overloaded. Energy surged from the consoles, sparks flew. H was at the center of it. Her hands were raised, trembling, and the glowing symbols around her swirled chaotically, out of control. Her breathing was rapid, uneven. She looked like she could collapse at any moment. Didn't hesitate, he rushed forward. H, stop, look at me. She turned her glowing eyes toward him, wide with panic. I can't, she whispered. The room hummed dangerously. Systems were failing. Lights flickered. The station's sensors had picked up her energy surges, and security teams were already rushing toward them. Reached out and grabbed her hands, holding them tightly but gently. You're not alone. I'm here. Breathe with me. For a moment she froze, overwhelmed. Then slowly, under his calm guidance, her shaking hands relaxed. The symbols flickered but stopped spinning. The energy in the room steadied. Could feel her fear like a storm, but he also felt something else, a fragile trust forming between them in the chaos. Security arrived seconds later. They raised weapons, unsure, wary. Alien energy had triggered alarms before, sometimes causing catastrophic failures, but stood in front of her, placing himself between the guards and H. Stop, he shouted. If you fire, you go through me first. The guards hesitated. A human standing fearlessly to protect an alien. It was unexpected, it was dangerous, and it bought them precious seconds. Knelt beside H, holding her trembling hands firmly. Look at me, he whispered again. You are safe, you are not a threat. Nothing will happen to you while I am here. Her breathing slowed just slightly, the chaotic energy calming around her. She looked at him, glowing eyes wide, trust and fear mingling in equal measure. Why do you risk yourself? She asked, voice trembling. Because someone once helped me when I was afraid, said simply. Maybe it's my turn to do the same. The guards lowered their weapons slowly, unsure of what they were seeing. A human protecting a powerful alien, not out of duty, not out of fear, but out of care. Something about it made them pause, and it gave H the room to regain control. By the time the alarm stopped, the room was quiet again. H slumped slightly, exhausted but no longer panicked. Remained close, holding her hands until she felt steady. You saved me, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't save you, said softly. You saved yourself. I just reminded you don't have to do it alone. For the first time since arriving on the station, H felt a flicker of relief. The chaos had passed. The fear was still there, lingering like a shadow, but now it was smaller. Now she could see a way through it because someone had chosen to stand with her. Looked at her and smiled faintly. We face fear together, he said. That's what makes us strong. H's glowing eyes softened. She had spent decades hiding her pain, shielding herself, pretending invulnerability. Now she realized something profound. Strength wasn't about being untouchable. Strength was about surviving, even when everything inside you screamed to give up, and finding someone who believed in you enough to stand by your side. The night stretched on, quiet and still. Outside the room, the station hummed and pulsed with life, oblivious to their struggle. But inside, two beings from different worlds understood each other in a way that no words could fully capture. Fear, trust, and compassion had intertwined. And in that quiet, chaotic moment, and H both understood the truth. Survival was not just about avoiding harm, it was about connection. And for the first time, H knew she was not alone. The news spread faster than anyone expected. One small incident in a quiet room on Orion Station became the center of attention. Security logs, system alarms, and eyewitness accounts all pointed to the same thing. H had lost control. For most, it was proof of instability. For some, it was proof of danger. Knew the stakes were high. If the authorities decided against her, she would be exiled or worse. There were no second chances for who showed weakness. Every station protocol, every treaty left little room for mercy. The hearing was scheduled for the next day in the station's central chamber. Humans and aliens alike would attend. Officials, scientists, and officers filled the room, their faces a mixture of curiosity, fear, and suspicion. H stood quietly beside, her glowing eyes lowered, her posture stiff. She had always carried herself as untouchable, but now the weight of judgment pressed on her in ways she had never felt before. The chief officer began the proceedings. His voice was cold, precise. The subject, H of Descent, has displayed erratic behavior, triggering station-wide alarms. Such instability is unacceptable. The board will determine her fate. Gasps rippled through the audience. Many humans whispered nervously, while some aliens murmured disapproval. All eyes were on her. Stepped forward. "I would like to speak on behalf of H," he said firmly. "She is not dangerous. She is not unstable in the way you think. What you witnessed was fear and trauma, not threat. She survived a war. She has lived with pain that most of us cannot even imagine." A murmur ran through the chamber. Some officers raised eyebrows. Aliens frowned. One human medical officer leaned forward, intrigued. Continued, "We often talk about strength. We admire control, power, and perfection. But real strength, the kind that matters, is surviving when you are broken. H survived a war, lost her family, and still exists. That is strength. That is courage. And that deserves protection, not punishment." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the station's systems. Then slowly other humans began to speak. First, a doctor. "I have treated trauma survivors," she said. "I have seen the fear that haunts them. Alien or human, strength is not in perfection. Strength is in resilience. H is resilient." A soldier added, "I've fought alongside humans and aliens alike. I've seen fear. I've seen breakdowns. What matters is how you respond." H responded with intelligence, with control, with restraint. She acted responsibly even when her body betrayed her. That is worthy of respect, not punishment. One by one, others spoke. Civilians, engineers, medical staff, human and alien, voiced the same idea. H had survived trauma. She had made mistakes, but she had not endangered anyone intentionally. She deserved compassion. She deserved a chance. The board members conferred quietly. The murmurs grew louder as arguments for exile and punishment were weighed against testimonies of understanding and empathy. Finally, the chief officer spoke. His tone was measured, careful. "After reviewing the incident and considering the testimonies of those who understand her plight, the board has decided. H will remain on Orion Station. She will undergo supervised therapy and monitoring, but she will not be exiled or removed. The station recognizes that her actions were a result of trauma, not threat." Relief washed over the room. H's body relaxed slightly, though she still trembled. She looked at, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude, disbelief, and something new, hope. You spoke for me," she whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't need to," said softly. "You spoke for yourself by surviving. I only reminded everyone that strength isn't just control, it's endurance, and you endured." For the first time, H smiled, a small, fragile curve of lips, yet radiant in its significance. She had been seen, truly seen, and the universe had not punished her. Instead, it had chosen mercy. Later, as they walked back to their shared room, the stars outside the windows of Orion Station sparkled like witnesses to the moment. Knew the struggle was far from over. H's path would still be hard, and some would still doubt her. But now she had allies. Now she had a human who believed in her. Now she had hope. Inside the room, silence stretched comfortably. For the first time, it was not filled with fear. It was filled with possibility. H turned to, You could have left," she said. "I didn't," he replied with a faint smile. "Because that's what humans do. We face fear, we face danger, and we protect. even when it's risky, even when no one else will. She studied him, glowing eyes shining softly. Your species is strange. Maybe, said, but sometimes being strange is exactly what the galaxy needs. And in that quiet moment between two worlds, two beings understood the truth. Survival was not only about life itself, it was about connection, courage, and compassion. H had survived the war. She had survived the night. And now she would survive her life on Orion Station, not alone, but with a human who refused to turn away. Days on Orion Station settled into a rhythm quiet yet full of small discoveries. The hearing was over, the threat of exile lifted, but life was not immediately easy. H still carried the weight of her past, the war, the loss, the constant fear of judgment. But now she did not carry it alone. Stayed by her side, quietly steady, a constant presence that reminded her she could breathe again. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of their shared room. H sat at the small table, carefully arranging the breakfast rations. Her glowing eyes softened as she watched shuffle into the room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. For the first time, the human did not seem small or fragile to her. He was steady, warm, and unyielding in a way she could feel in her chest. Good morning, he said, stretching lazily. Good morning, she replied, her voice quieter than usual, almost hesitant. Yet there was a softness to it, a trust she had never shown before. Breakfast passed in silence, but it was a comfortable silence. They had learned to share space without speaking, to communicate in glances and gestures. For H, it was a revelation. Humans communicated with emotion, not only words. They shared feelings even in stillness. His quiet presence said more than any ritual ever could. After breakfast, went to work, and H remained in the room, her attention on small, precise tasks. The station's therapy programs had begun, and she slowly learned to release some of the fear that had haunted her for years. She practiced breathing exercises, focused on controlling the energy around her, and allowed herself to feel sadness without guilt. Yet the most important lessons came not from therapy, but from he was patient, never forcing her to speak, never judging her for her alien tears or trembles. When she faltered, he reminded her gently, "It's okay. You're human in the ways that matter. You feel, you survive. That is enough." Slowly, H began to laugh again. At first, it was a sound barely audible, like glass chimes shaken in a quiet room. But it grew louder, freer, and found himself smiling every time he heard it. The laughter was a bridge between their worlds, a proof that healing was possible even in the aftermath of pain. Evenings were their favorite time. They would sit together by the window looking at distant stars. The station hummed quietly around them, but in their small corner the world felt calm. Would talk about human stories, simple things about life, humor, or memories from Earth he had never shared with anyone else. H listened, fascinated by the strangeness of human emotion. She began to understand why humans survived wars with hearts intact. They fought not only with strength, but with hope, with connection, with the will to protect each other. One evening, as a soft blue glow from the station's orbit reflected on her skin, H turned too. "You walked in by accident," she said softly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Best mistake I ever made," he replied with a grin. She studied him, her glowing eyes reflecting something new, curiosity, warmth, and perhaps admiration. "Your species faces fear, yet chooses kindness," she observed. Shrugged, "We make mistakes, we get hurt, but sometimes standing with someone who needs you is worth the risk." H considered this carefully. For decades, she had learned to trust only herself. But now she realized that trust could exist across worlds, across species, and that a human could teach her something no teacher ever could. That vulnerability was not weakness and connection was strength. Weeks passed. H regained control over her energy. She returned to some duties on the station, though slowly, with supporting her when needed. Her glowing eyes were no longer filled with fear, but with cautious confidence, and noticed subtle changes in himself too, a sense of responsibility, of pride, and unexpectedly of deep affection for this alien who had survived so much yet allowed herself to feel again. One quiet night, as they shared a small meal together, H reached across the table, lightly touching his hand. It was a small gesture, but heavy with meaning. Looked at her, heart swelling. "You stayed," she whispered. I did, he replied, and I will continue to stay, not because I have to, but because I want to. H's lips curved into a full, luminous smile. For the first time in decades, she felt truly safe. Not just from the station, or from authority, or from fear, but safe in connection, safe in trust, safe with a human who had chosen empathy over fear, courage over judgment, and presence over distance. And in that quiet room, surrounded by the endless stars, they discovered something universal. Life was not just survival, it was sharing. Not just existing, but being seen. And in each other's presence, they had finally begun to live. The stars outside Orion's station shone quietly, indifferent to the struggles inside its walls. But for an H, every star felt alive that night, reflecting the journey they had traveled together, from fear, pain, and uncertainty to trust, courage, and connection. Life on the station was no longer a daily battle for H. She moved with a quiet confidence now, her glowing eyes steady, her energy controlled. She had returned to her duties, but differently, more balanced, aware of her limits, yet unafraid to ask for help when needed. And remained her constant presence, her human anchor in a vast and sometimes uncaring galaxy. The events of the past weeks had rippled far beyond their shared room. Stories of a human defending an alien, standing firm against prejudice and fear, spread across the station. Other humans began to reconsider their assumptions. Other aliens began to see that humanity could be more than fragile bodies and fleeting courage. Orion Station became, slowly, a different place. Spaces were shared more thoughtfully. Rules were softened where cruelty or misunderstanding had once been absolute. And somewhere in quiet corners, beings who had once been strangers began to connect, not out of duty, but because empathy had shown them the way. H never forgot that night, when the alarms had screamed and chaos had surrounded her. She never forgot, standing tall, holding her hands, teaching her that even when everything inside you shakes, you are not alone. That lesson, more than any therapy or rule change, reshaped her life. One evening, as they sat together by the window of their shared room, H turned to with a thoughtful expression. "You walked in by accident," she said softly, her glowing eyes reflecting the distant stars. "Best accident I ever had," replied with a small smile. She studied him for a long moment. "You're kind, faces fear, yet chooses kindness, even when it is risky, even when others would judge." "Sometimes," said, "the right choice isn't the easy one. Sometimes it's just standing there, even when the world tells you to step aside." H's lips curved into a faint, radiant smile. "I understand now. Strength is not control alone. Strength is survival and trust, connection, compassion." Reached across the small table, gently touching her hand. It was simple, human, and yet it carried more meaning than any ceremony or ritual. H felt warmth, a tether between their worlds, a proof that even across species, hearts could align. "Do you believe in humans now?" she asked, half teasing, half serious. Laughed softly. "I think you're starting to," he said. They sat in silence for a while, just being together. Outside, the station hummed and thrummed, full of beings carrying their own fears and struggles. But in this small room, a human and an alien had rewritten what it meant to survive, not with weapons, not with orders, not with fear, but with empathy, courage, and care. Years later, their story was told again and again across Orion Station. It was not a story of war, victory, or conquest. It was a story of humanity, of what one human could do when he saw another being in pain and refused to turn away. It became a lesson for all species. Strength was not domination, it was protection. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was the willingness to act despite it. And compassion was the greatest power anyone could wield. H became an example, not just of a survivor, but of what could be achieved when trust and empathy were allowed to flourish. Never sought recognition. For him, the true reward was the quiet moments, watching her laugh, seeing her glow not with fear but with hope, sharing a room and a life that had once been marked by loneliness. And sometimes, when the station was still and the stars stretched endlessly outside, they would sit together by the window, hands touching, hearts connected. The galaxy beyond was vast and indifferent, but they had found their small universe in each other. Whispered softly, almost to himself, "We didn't conquer the stars with strength. We did it with kindness, with understanding, with courage to stand for someone else." H leaned closer, her alien glow softening. "And sometimes," she said, "one human is enough to remind the galaxy what it means to be alive." Outside, the stars blinked in quiet approval. Inside, a human and an alien shared a life shaped not by fear, but by trust. Not by war, but by empathy. And in that moment, they knew the universe could be vast, cold, and indifferent. But together, they had created warmth, hope, and the enduring power of connection. The galaxy had learned, quietly that night, that survival was not enough. To truly live, one had to be brave enough to care. And an H, two unlikely roommates from different worlds, had done exactly that.